So I'm here to talk to you today about a small problem today that could turn into a big one later. Youth are not being listened to. We are not listening to the young people in this world. Did you hear me? We are not listening to the young people in this world. Now, I don't have to have a study to prove that to you. Ask any of the young people in this room if their voice is heard. Occasionally, what we'll do is we will ask a couple young people to speak on behalf of all young people. Now, we all know how that works, right? Not well. There is a lot of young people out there who do not get services or get resources that they need because they're not at those tables. Young people need to be at those tables. The decisions are being made about them. So I'm here today to move us into a space of thinking about what that's going to look like. When I was 7 years old, I worried. I worried so much that the Boston Globe decided to come to my house and do a story on me. Not really. What happened was, actually, we were really poor. And my mom sat me down and she said, there's going to be a couple people that come and talk to us and they want to live with us and learn about what it means to be poor. And I said, well, are they going to teach us what it feels like to be rich? And she said no. So they came and they stayed with us for about a week. And during that time, I was learning about what they were doing with this. And so my mom actually kept the article, and I still have it here. I look at it, and it takes me right back to that moment when I was a young person, and I was scared, and I was afraid of what I couldn't control. I was embarrassed by this. We would go out to the grocery store, and I remember using food stamps and being in line because we were poor. And I remember everyone looking at me, feeling like I was being judged. And I don't know if I can convey to you at 7 years old if I can really give you that emotion, but it made me feel like I was already unwelcome. I wasn't supposed to be here, and I was a burden on society. So, has anyone in here ever felt that they were being judged or mistaken? Mm-hmm. I bet you all have. It's our common bond, experience and memory. So if I could, get everyone to close their eyes for just a moment. And we're gonna time travel. We're gonna go down memory lane. And I want you to find one memory that is about you and another person that was interacting with you, and your voice was not heard. You didn't get heard. And everyone knows what that feels like when you're trying to convey a message and it just couldn't happen. Okay? Who was there? How did you feel? Alone? Isolated? Unworthy? Everyone got their memory? Hold it. Now, I want you to go back down memory lane again. And I want you to think of another memory. This time, I want the memory to be about a time you were absolutely heard, a time you were validated. You knew that person absolutely got everything you were saying. What would that feel like? The important part about this particular memory is that the person that listened to you was special. Why? How did they make you feel? Probably worthy, welcome, engaged, a part of something. That is our common bond. We can be any age, but we all have experienced it, and I'm challenging us all to come back to that middle ground of understanding what it feels like to not be heard and what it feels like to be heard. My first time of being heard was with my fourth grade teacher. This is Mrs. Max. I'm supposed to call her Carla now because I'm older. So this is at her retirement party. I felt like I should reciprocate since she came to my high school graduation and both my college graduations. Mrs. Max and I have a very special connection. She saw me at 9 years old in a very, very bad spot. My family was obviously poor. My parents were struggling with addiction, and I was absolutely lost and alone. No one was talking to me. I was being bullied at school, and one day Mrs. Max, she actually stopped me and she said, "Hey, do you want to talk?" And I didn't know what to say because no one had actually ever asked me if I wanted to talk. And I said, okay. And she said, I will listen. I just will let you. We can talk about anything you want, Michael, anything you want. And I'm just going to listen. So the really cool thing about her listening wasn't that she sat and checked her phone or was multitasking. She sat for an hour after school every Wednesday with me and had complete eye contact engagement with me. She was absolutely nodding her head, saying, I understand what you're saying. That's so important. It's an important piece to listening to other people. That was the first time I had been heard. Mrs. Max created the space for me to be heard. So this whole space concept I just spoke about, this is where youth and adults intersect. There's this really special spot in my mind, right here in the middle, that is sacred. If we allow it to be, we have to create that. Inside this space, there's one rule. Success isn't permanent, and failure isn't fatal. For youth and for adults working with youth, it's absolutely imperative that this is the one rule that everyone agrees with. Because we're all going to mess up. We're human. We're fallible. We're going to trip, and we need to know that when we trip and fall, we can get back up and come back and talk about it, right? We can reflect. That's the piece to learning that we are losing out on in so many moments with young people today. It's black and white. It's you got in or you didn't. How about actually creating a space where it's okay to fail and acknowledging the failure? So I want to talk to you about my first opportunity to actually try out this whole creating the space thing. I didn't know I was creating the space until I was like halfway through this whole mentoring process. I'm going to introduce you to Kyle. Kyle Eggers is a great friend of mine. We have been working together since 2009. I met Kyle at an event where he was on a youth panel and I was facilitating the panel. This particular event, a woman raised her hand and she asked the youth on the panel, tell me how you are going to abstain. I'm supposed to be facilitating the panel, and I have this moment where you guys don't need to answer that question. There are 300 adults in this room, and that's probably not the most appropriate question. But Kyle grabbed the mic. He grabbed the mic, and he said, I'll take it. I'll take it. Kyle gave the best response to this woman and reminded her that this is not something that's just started with this generation or your generation or anyone's generation. This is an issue that we've dealt with for a long time, and as opposed to just acting like it's not happening in other generations, we need to acknowledge it's happening and work on it. So Kyle came to me after this particular event because he had found his voice. He had a standing ovation after that comment, and he's like, I want to do more. Can we meet? Can we meet and talk? And I said, absolutely. I said, absolutely, yes, I will meet you. We started meeting at a coffee shop about every other week, and didn't know what was going to be born, but over time, we created the Kansas Consortium for Youth Voice, which is a youth-led organization that actually creates the space for youth to lift their voice, find their voice, practice using their voice. We don't get a lot of those opportunities to actually talk about what we're passionate about. We created the space. So Kyle and I were talking on the phone about this talk, and I said, Kyle, what's the most important piece for me to convey to the audience since you're not going to be here to talk about this? And he says, well, I don't know. And I said, well, I start listing off all the accomplishments. You know, he was appointed by the governor to be on the Commission for Dropout Prevention. The first 17-year-old in the state of Kansas. That's a huge feat for a young person. I'll also tell you that while he was on that panel, he was not really welcomed by several adults, and they actually told him a couple times that he needed to leave. But he was appointed by the governor, so it was okay for him to be there. I also could talk about the 2 grants that the youth wrote, netting them $100,000 to continue the work that they were doing. That's empowering. So I mentioned these things to him. He says, no, Michael, that's what you're interested in. That's what adults are interested in because that looks good on grants and that we can tell our story. And I said, you're right. So what is it that you are passionate about, Kyle? Why is this important to you? He said, look at all the people's lives we changed, Michael. Together we created that space, that sacred space, and it was bigger than just you and I. We shared it with other people. We gave other people their voice. We gave other people an opportunity to practice using their voice. That's what's important to me. That's why I did what I did, and I'm so thankful we had that chance. So today, simply put, I have a challenge. Please don't give up on each other. It's never, ever okay. We need to stop just backing away. People are going to fail and people are going to have problems, but come back to the table. This is very important. I'm also going to say a couple things about what adult champions, when I say adult champions, that could mean an adult that's interested in working with youth. It also could be an adult that a young person is maybe interested in working with. So I'm challenging the adults to create that space. The space I talked about where success isn't permanent and failure isn't fatal. And absolutely protect it. Listen. Genuinely listen like Mrs. Max listened to me with eye contact and nonverbal cues and letting me know she heard me. She asked great questions about what I was telling her about. Sometimes it was serious and sometimes it wasn't. But it didn't matter. She was actually listening to me. We created a lifelong friendship from that opportunity in 4th grade. Co-seek opportunities. Co-seek opportunities. Adults have a tendency to kind of run things, right? They want to just make it all happen. Have young people work with you to help them figure out what it is they want to do. It's a partnership. You may be able to find resources, but it's important that the youth is involved in that process. Youth, honor the space. If there's an adult out there that is actually working with you, give them the space, honor the space, show up when you're supposed to show up. And if you don't, then honor the space that we talked about and talk about it. Talk about what happened, reflect on it. It's okay because success isn't permanent, failure isn't fatal. You learn from those situations. That's how you let that adult know that you're showing up and you're there to be there with them. Seek quality listeners. A lot of times it's hard to find an adult that's interested in what you're interested in or is maybe going to work with you. So my advice is to start testing folks that you are around every day. Teachers, it could be your parents, but not everyone is a great listener. Some people are very busy, but if you set up a space and you ask people, can we talk? And they're checking their phone and they're doing other things, they're probably not the best listener. It doesn't make them a bad person. It just makes them maybe not the best listener. And what you're looking for is a really good listener. Third piece is unite and network. When I say this, you could talk about activities that you're involved in at school. You could talk about all the things that go into working together. But I'm also going to challenge you and say when you see somebody who's not using their voice or doesn't have a voice, go talk to them, pull them in. You can create that same space I was just talking about that the adults are creating with young people with another peer. Where success isn't permanent and failure isn't fatal because there's a lot of young people who need that too. And they're not probably going to get it until somebody comes to them. So finally, I have one last request of this group. Go out, find one person in 1 week to create the space with. One person. And I can't make you do this, and there's no way I can hold you accountable. But the youth of our future, they're depending on it. Thank you.